Welcome back to Contemporary Black Voices, where today's topic is about the government involvement really in these prison systems and how there's a pipeline of a lot of corporations making tons of money off of prisoners. So, Caleb, before you get started, I was trying to map something in my mind. And I know that during the break, Carl was showing a picture of a resort. So, if if prisoners are being funneled out to resorts
Mm-hmm.
or to restaurants or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and you get the ticket back, and you've had
Mm-hmm.
a John Doe or Jane Doe serving you,
Mm-hmm.
and you give them a gratuity, and in a lot of tickets they have a forced gratuity on these tickets.
Mm-hmm.
So, are you telling me that the gratuity that customers are paying is not going to the server,
Right.
it's going back to the prison?
It's going back to the
So
prison.
we are actually helping the government and the
Right.
corporations making money.
Right. You're actually tipping. You're tipping the jail that loaned the prisoner out, and you may even be tipping the the restaurant or the resort that basically bought that prisoner for the day.
This is really disturbing. This is really disturbing. It's kind of like just when you think that this country can't get any lower,
Right.
every day it just demonstrates, no, let me show you just how low can I go.
Right.
And these prisoners are just being used. And then the other thing that we mentioned in our pre-show meeting
Mm-hmm.
is that you were saying that you have a lot of prisoners or pre-prisoners
Mm-hmm.
who are in pre-trial
Mhm.
hearing,
Mm-hmm.
who are really in a lock, who are put in lockdown,
Mm-hmm.
but are not really committed of a crime,
Right.
have been sentenced to a crime,
Mm-hmm.
but they're in pre-trial lockup,
Mm-hmm.
who are also being funneled out
Right.
to work on these farms, these
Right.
manufacturing plants, whatever, and they're only getting so much money. So
Mm-hmm.
you keep hearing about people in pretrial
Mhm.
for years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So no, people who are pre-trial detention, they haven't been convicted of any crime, but a lot of times they're funneled out and they go and work at these different locations, the restaurants. Popeyes is a prime example, McDonald's. So your server who's working at Popeyes or McDonald's or KFC or Burger King or whatever could be someone who's innocent, who's just been accused of a crime, but who's being farmed out to work, maybe simply because they couldn't afford bond. Which is a lot of us, a lot of black folks. We get these high bonds. We can't afford to get out. We end up stuck in jail for years, and we're farmed out for labor.
And they're stuck out. They're stuck in jail for years
Mhm.
because they haven't been
Right.
sentenced
They
to
haven't
a
been
crime.
sentenced. They haven't been tried. They haven't even been tried, let alone sentenced. So they could actually end up winning their case and getting out after being farmed out for labor. You know what I mean? For months or years or
So
whatever.
speedy trial means nothing.
Oh no, there's no such thing as a speedy trial in this country anymore. So, no, they it's a tragic situation. It's a situation that definitely. I'm glad we're doing this show today because we definitely needed to bring this to light. Because of course we make up a vast majority of the prison population, and so to see what's going on and how we're being treated. Like I say, the women. There's stories in that article that I keep referencing. How the women they're told they're subject to abuse. They're subject to not only verbal but physical abuse. They're telling them get back on the whole line, ho. You know what I mean? And that's in the article. That's actually in the article. And so they are they're treated like like it's slavery. It truly is. And so another thing that I did want to mention is that a lot of these large work farms, which cattle is very prominent, and wheat and flour. And I want to give a shout out to Gold Medal Flour, who gets a lot of their flour from prison labor. But they're located on former plantations, so they didn't even have to go far. They just they just
This story
they,
just
yeah.
keeps getting
So
worse and worse.
They took former slave plantations and are now they're active again using prison labor, black prison labor, who are still working on these plantations.
Would you please comment on this? I looked this up during our break. It says the Federal Prison Industry, Inc., FPI, also known as Unicor, is a self-supporting, wholly owned government corporation of the District of Columbia. What does that mean?
So it is a corporation that's based in Washington, D.C., that is owned by the federal government.
Owned by the federal government?
It is
So
owned-
it's our government that's doing this to us?
The federal government owns Unicor, and the federal government owns. Unicors are based inside of the federal prisons. Okay, so each federal prison has a factory inside of it, and so again, I know we had mentioned this earlier about how the taxpayers foot the bill. So of course, we're footing the bill to house, feed, take care of the medical needs of the prisoners, and they go to work for Unicor, and so it's all profit, all by the federal government. It's a corporation that's owned by the federal government. They manufacture everything, parts for nuclear submarines, parts for jet fighters, parts for tanks, parts, I mean, everything you can think of, the federal government has to buy from Unicor, which basically means the federal government has to buy from the federal government.
So okay, we're talking about adult prisoners.
We're talking about adult prisoners.
Now let's talk about the babies
Okay,
in juvenile prisons.
okay.
Are we seeing this type of stuff going on in juvenile detention areas?
You know what? I have not. I didn't look that up. I haven't researched that.
I
So
mean,
don't-
they're already trying to change, when kids can get married or
Right.
stuff like that. So it seems to me there's got to be. It sounds to me that there's a slight loophole, even in the juvenile detention areas.
Well, you know what? They have no problem certifying 15, 16, 17-year-olds. And so you have a lot of 15, 16, 17-year-olds that are in adult
Sure.
institutions.
There
yeah.
it is. There it is.
Oklahoma is notorious for that. So is, like Mississippi, Alabama, but in particular, Oklahoma will sentence a 15-year-old and send them to
See,
an
all
adult
this is making
prison.
sense
When
now.
their brain is not even a 15-year-old
This
brain is
all
not even
making sense
formed,
now
fully
as to
formed.
what we see in the paper. You're being sentenced as an adult. You're being trialed as an adult.
Oh, yeah.
You're being trialed as an adult so that you can work your behind
yeah.
in one of those locations.
Yeah.
Now, is this also applicable to private prisons?
Yeah, absolutely. Private prisons, that's their moneymaker, loaning out labor. It is.
So this second paragraph, I think, explains as to why they would claim that they're doing this. It says FPI provides training and employment for prisoners confined to a federal penal and correction institution through the sale of its supplies and services to government agencies.
Right.
Okay.
That's it sounds good. But
Sounds
I
good,
promise
yeah.
you that a federal prisoner who's worked and built cables or brake systems or whatever for Boeing cannot get out of that federal prison and go work for Boeing. They've built or they can't get out and go work for McDonnell Douglas or General Dynamics or Northrop Grumman or General Electric Boat. They built parts, communications parts. They built all these stuff for these nuclear submarines, but they can't get out and go work for that company outside of prison. They won't hire them. Besides the fact that they won't pass the clearance because they have a federal conviction, they just won't hire them anyway.
I would really like to urge any of our listeners who are watching this, and if you know somebody who's been involved in this system, I would encourage you to comment on our site so that we can hear from you. I really would like, this is a very concerning issue to me. I'm glad to Caleb for actually bringing this up, but I'm very concerned about this topic.
Yeah, and it's we have to revisit the 13th Amendment. You know what I mean? This idea
For people who don't know, can you basically sum up what the 13th Amendment says?
So I mean, it bans involuntary servitude, but the exception is for people who have been convicted of a crime. So
There's a loophole.
that's the loophole.
And people convicted of a crime,
Right.
go on.
Prisoners. So basically, you can force prisoners into labor. Basically, so the 13th Amendment does not apply. So basically, it's slavery or involuntary servitude, except if you convict of a crime.
Right. So let me just recap to make sure that people understand. Slavery is illegal
Right.
from the 13th Amendment.
Right.
With an exception, if you go to prison, then they can enslave you.
Then you're a slave again. Right.
Right.
So there, after slavery,
And this is the United States Constitution, by the way.
after slavery, remember, so this used to be a common practice, and I wish Fred was here to talk about it. So where they would accuse you of a crime, and a white person would go and get you out of prison, but then you'd have to work for that white person to pay back what
And
they.
right. And you've seen this being enacted in movies like The Color Purple.
Right.
Where,
Right.
Where the white woman went ahead and and picked up Fantasia's character.
Right.
And she had to work for her.
She had to work for it. Right. To pay that back.
I had a grandfather who I think most of you either have known or knew about. He was 102. He died about a year ago. And I can remember him telling me, growing up in Brenham, Texas, how the sheriff or somebody would come along. They'd see Caleb or somebody walking along the street, and they say, "Get in the car. Get in the car, Caleb," okay? And he said, "What did I do?" "Just get in the car." And they would take him to jail, and after they would take him to jail, they would immediately take him and put him on the farm to actually do work.
Yeah.
And that's the way it went down. So, you're not lying, but
It's
this is
disturbing. It's disturbing.
it's very
And then
disturbing.
the other thing you mentioned was there was a woman, and Carl, if you can put her face up, where she had to work the prison system, and even though they get paid pennies on the dollar, all she was given as part of her salary were sanitary napkins,
Mm-hmm. She said she got toilet paper and sanitary napkins.
toilet paper.
Yeah, 13 years. 13 years, and she's the ones that had made the comment about how vicious it was, and how they were the amount of exploitation and the amount of violence that goes along. She's the one that said that they would tell her all the time, hey, get back on the whole line, ho. You know what I mean? And so they're subjected to just mental and physical abuse with these male guards that are out there on these horseback with these rifles. And it's constant abuse and constant torture. And so a lot of times, even though we've seen there is some mechanization with it in the system, so you do have inmates that are on tractors and combines, but for the most part, they rely on just back-breaking manual labor.
So as we wrap up, can both of you relate or tell how this may relate to those government people? Let me take that back. To those large corporation billionaires who are supporting somebody like a Trump, who is saying that these things are basically going to happen, and why they want to see these things happen, and how the correlation is between that and getting these folks into the prison system and getting the free labor.
So if you start looking at it, this is almost we need another show on this.
Right.
We really do, because if you start following the money, and the fact that this country does not push for a living wage, okay?
Right.
This is why you have the prison system, the allowance of these immigrants coming across the border is because of the push for not doing a living wage. So let's just look at Walmart, for an example, how people were complaining about the salaries there. Well, Walmart, quote unquote, doesn't have to do anything about paying you a living wage when they can get 23 cents on the dollar to pay somebody.
Right.
So I think that as citizens, it's time that we open our eyes up more and more as to what's going on, what really is going on, and why the situations that we might be in or our family members might be in is not because they did not earn it. Okay, it's because corporations don't want to pay it.
Right, and I can also I see a correlation with the same thing, with the affirmative action, with the DEI, with the assault on history, with the assault on education. And so if they're denying you, same thing with the assault on black education. So if they're denying you the ability for upward mobility, then if you can't move up, then there's only one direction you can go in. And so I see it tied together in that aspect. And so, yeah, we definitely need to pay attention. We definitely need to watch this space. We definitely need to be vocal and speak out about DEI, because if your kids can't go to college, there's another place for them.
And with that being said, we are going to go ahead and wrap up today's show. And we do ask you to please comment, because this is an eye-opening topic. And as we end, get ready for hot topics.